35mm is one of my favorite focal lengths when it comes to shooting portraits, and it's a favorite amongst a lot of other photographers, mostly because you can capture a lot more environment around your subject. Today, I have the 35mm f1.4 made by Sigma, a super common lens amongst portrait photographers. But I also have the 35mm f1.2 version made by Sigma, and the difference between these two lenses is pretty big. So today I have a portrait session where I'm going to be comparing these two lenses, see if you can even tell a difference between them, and if it's worth it to spend the extra $800, $900 on the f1.2 version, or is the 1.4 version good enough? I want to thank our model Hershita, who's going to be coming out to do this portrait session and for us to compare these lenses, but also thank Rich and Anthony, who are going to be filming the BTS for this video. You can find their socials down below. And with that being said, let's go compare these two. So it's important to know that both these lenses are amazing, and if you want that 35mm focal length, the 1.4 will do just fine. It really comes down to personal preference and how much you're willing to spend. So the reason why I like 35mm so much when it comes to prime lenses is because they're a lot more versatile than other focal lengths. You can shoot basically everything from architecture, street photography, portraits, even weddings. It's wide but not too wide where it distorts your subject's face, and it's wide enough that you can use in all situations. If you want a tighter looking shot, you could always just crop in, especially on a camera like the Sony a7 IV, which I'm using. At 33 megapixels, I can crop in and still get a great shot. Using tighter lenses like a 50 or an 85, you're kind of limiting yourself, not able to capture wider shots unless you swap out lenses. Besides the fact that the f1.2 version is much larger than the f1.4 version, the controls and the functions on the outside of each lens are practically the exact same. You still have a manual aperture ring, you have a declick button, you have the AFL lock, which you can set to any custom button, and you have your autofocus manual focus switch. So let's talk about why you'd want to choose the f1.2 version over the f1.4, and that's that the f1.2 is faster and it allows a half a stop of light more than the f1.4, which means it's better in low light than the f1.4 version. It has more aperture blades and you do get a little bit more bokeh. Now, every lens has a sweet spot, and that's usually about a stop or two more than the widest aperture of your lens. But with the f1.2 version, I found that you actually get a super sharp image at f1.4 when you crank it up to f1.4. And with the f1.4 lens, you get the sharpest image at about f2. So if you are looking to get the most out of your lens at the widest aperture, then the f1.2 is going to be a better job getting the sharpest image, keeping it as wide as possible. Now, the f1.2 version sounds to be the better lens, and that's because it is the better lens. However, the 1.4 version has a lot going for itself to be a better lens than the 1.2 version, just in a different aspect. So the 35mm f1.4 is cheaper. It's about $800 cheaper than the 35mm f1.2. It's also lighter and smaller, which is a huge game changer if you were deciding between these two. I shouldn't even say it's lighter, it's significantly lighter and smaller than the f1.2 version, which means it's easier to carry with you and bring in your bag and lug around all day, which for me makes a huge difference and why I would choose the 1.4 over the 1.2. Now, just because it is cheaper, lighter, and smaller doesn't mean you sacrifice image quality. It's still part of Sigma's art line, which means you still get an extremely sharp image and insane image quality with this lens. I honestly think you don't sacrifice anything going with the 1.4 version. And it's still 1.4, so it's good in low light situations. Maybe not as good as the 1.2 with that extra half a stop, but it's still extremely good in low light situations. Now, the reason why I shoot with Sigma lenses is because they're extremely sharp and high quality. It doesn't matter if you go with Sigma's contemporary line or art line, you're still getting amazing build quality, extremely good image quality. They're weather sealed, their autofocus is extremely fast and on par with native lenses. And I think the best part about Sigma lenses is that they're almost always half the cost of manufacturer lenses, which means you can buy 2 good Sigma lenses for the price of 1 manufacturer lens. Now, I've been using the Sigma 35mm f1.4 for years now, and it's definitely my favorite portrait lens. I rock multiple lenses like the 16 to 28mm, 24 to 70mm, all at the same time, and I don't have room for the 1.2. If I only carried one lens or had room in my bag, then the 1.2 would probably be the one I would use all the time. Because the bokeh is a little bit better, you do get a little bit of sharper image quality, but it's just such a big lens that I think the 1.4 version is still an amazing lens. But if you had to choose one, which one would you choose? If you want the 35mm look, a sharp, high quality lens, something lightweight and small, I would go with the 35mm f1.4. If you have the money to spend, you don't mind the extra weight or size, a lens that's super sharp even at 1.4, and you want amazing bokeh, the 35mm 1.2 is just going to be the one for you. I did not think I was going to be throwing that high. It was a little scary, but 35mm 1.4, 35mm 1.2, we're back from our photo shoot, and I'll be honest, I did not see a big difference between the 1.4 version or the photos taken on the 1.4 and the photos taken on the 1.2. At least not a big enough difference or like a huge difference to justify spending the extra $700-800 on the 1.2 version. Sure, you do get a little bit more bokeh with this lens here. You can actually see that the photos taken on this lens, you have that like swirly bokeh going on. The f1.2 I found was also sharper, especially if you bring it up to f1.4, then this is at 1.4 or wide open. And that's because this lens here, its sweet spot, every lens has a sweet spot. This one here is sharpest at about f2, whereas this one here is at its sharpest as wide open as 1.4. When looking at these photos individually, like when I opened them up on Lightroom and I was looking at one photo taken at 1.2 and one photo taken with the 1.4, you can tell a difference. This lens is obviously much sharper, you get more bokeh, and it is the better lens, but when you combine all these photos in a gallery, you can't really tell which photo was taken with this lens and which photo was taken with this lens. Which makes you think, is there really that big of a difference to want to spend the extra money on this lens? But the biggest deal breaker for me with this lens here is the size and weight. Like, I think both lenses are amazing, and at the end of the day, it comes down to your budget and personal preference. But I'll be honest, this lens, the 1.2, is hefty. It is a big lens, and it does weigh more than the 1.4 version. You can see that right here, and you can see that when you compare both lens caps. Look at this one here and look at this one here. This one is a 67mm opening, meaning it takes 67mm filters, and this one 82mm filters. So that difference between 82 and 67, you can really see that here, and that's a big difference. It goes to show how much bigger this lens is compared to this lens here. Because of the bigger size and the added weight, this outweighs the pros of this lens, the added sharpness and the better bokeh. I would much rather take a lighter lens that still performs exceptionally well, amazing quality, sharpness, and bokeh, and it's much lighter and smaller. But with that being said, let me know if you were able to spot the difference between these two lenses. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you click that like button, hit the subscribe button to see more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.